Hello and welcome to this video where I'm going to be looking at some general methods for solving quadratics. So on the screen you can see I have written out a quadratic. In this case the a value, the number before the x squared, is 2, the b value is 1 and the c value is -3. Now I have the whole thing equal to 0. In order to solve quadratics you do need to have the whole thing equal to 0. If you do not, then you want to rearrange it in order to get everything equal to 0 for any of these methods to work. But once you do have a case where it's equal to 0, you can go ahead and solve. Now our first method, and probably I'd argue the most popular one, is to factorise the quadratic. So factorise means to put the quadratic into brackets, and that can be done like so. I don't want to talk about the specific method we're going from here to here in this video. I'm just focusing on the solving, but I will link a video in the description that I've done on how you factorise quadratics like this. Once you do have it factorised though, because you know that this times this is equal to 0, then there are two different valid solutions that will make the whole thing equal to 0. If 2x plus 3 was 0, then I would say, well, this is 0, and it doesn't really matter what this is because 0 times anything is 0. So this is one valid solution to the quadratic. And then you can go ahead and solve this. So let's take 3 onto the other side and subtract. So I have 2x is -3, and then I can divide through by 2, so x is -3 over 2. Now that was just one solution because we can do exactly the same thing with the other bracket. So if I said that x minus 1 is 0, well then that would mean that this is equal to 0, and if this is equal to 0, then I don't really care what this is, because something times 0 will also give me the solution of 0. So in this case, I can go ahead and solve this. So this is easy. Just take the 1 onto the other side. It's going to be positive, and x is 1. And so then these are the two solutions. X is 1 and x is -3 over 2. Going on to our next method, this is the quadratic formula. If you're sitting an IGCSE or a GCSE paper, you'll get given this formula in your formula book. So if, for instance, you had a quadratic like so here I have 1x squared minus x and then -12, then what you need to do is find the a, the b, and the c values, these numbers here, and then substitute them into this formula. So in my case, I have a is 1, b is -1, and c is -12, like so. Once you've got these three values, you substitute them into this formula here, like so, and then you can either type that whole thing into your calculator, or I've done a pen and paper method here where I've evaluated this. You get to the final answers in this case of x is -3 or x is +4. And if you want that example in a little bit more detail, I've also done a more in-depth video on the quadratic formula, which I'll also link below. Now another method we have is completing the square. So if we have a quadratic that looks like this, I can complete the square on this. Now this is a process that turns a quadratic that looks like this into one that looks like this. So you have a value, x plus or minus some value all squared, and then a value on the end, plus or minus. Again, I don't want to go into detail about how I do this because it will make the video extraordinarily long. But if you want to see how you complete the square, I have another video which I will also link below. Now in the case that your quadratic is equal to 0, once you have completed the square, you can then solve this by rearranging. So the first thing I'm going to do is take this -8 onto the other side. So I have 2x plus 3 all squared is equal to 8. Then I'm going to divide through by 2. So I have x plus 3 all squared is equal to 8 divided by 2, which is 4. Now I'm going to take the square root of 4. Now when you take the square root of a number, this is where you have two solutions. Because if I have 2 squared, well this is 4, but also minus 2 squared, this is also 4. So when I'm taking the square root and going backwards, I can say that x plus 3 is equal to plus or minus 2. There are two different solutions when you take the square root of 4. Now we are going to, last step is to take that 3 onto the other side. So x is equal to -3 plus or minus 2. And you can kind of see what happens with the quadratic formula here. We're having these two solutions. This is where the plus minus bit comes from. And then I want to do this in turn. So I either have x is -3 plus 2. And so in that case, x is going to be -1. Or I have the case where x is -3, -2, and so in that case I have the solution that x is -5. So two solutions, one from that positive and one from the negative, which come from taking the square root of 4. So that's how you can solve with completing the square. So these are the three algebraic methods. If in your exam paper you are asked to either show all your steps or to use an algebraic method or not to use a calculator, then this is the method you do. You also could solve these functions quite often using your calculator. So the first method that I put in here for solving quadratics is just to use your calculator. Depending on what model you have, you can go into the menu, click on the equation option, and then lots of calculators will enable you to solve. Now, I'd recommend if you have a calculator in your exam and you're asked to solve this, even if they say using an algebraic method, I would still recommend that you use your calculator either at the start or at the end, just to check your answer. Yeah, so if they ask use an algebraic method, you're going to do one of these. If you have a calculator, then still go ahead and use your calculator to solve, and then that will just satisfy that you've done it right. And then you can use either 2, 3, or 4, factorize quadratic formula, or complete the square to satisfy to your examiner that you've used a proper method. Okay, thank you so much for watching this video. As I previously said, I have videos on factorising, quadratic formula, and completing the square. All three of those will be linked in the description, and I really hope you found this helpful.